What if the ache you carry isn't from your past, but from your future? Not a failure, not a trauma, but a quiet knowing that something essential was meant to happen and didn't. You go about your day, check your phone, sit in silence, and suddenly, there it is again, that strange hollowness, like a door half open to a room you can't enter, a presence of absence, a feeling that this can't be all there is. But here's the paradox. The more you try to fix it, the worse it gets. The more you chase fulfillment, the more artificial it feels. So what is this haunting emptiness really pointing to? Kierkegaard understood, and his answer cuts deeper than comfort. We've been taught that life is a journey from lack to fulfillment, that the hunger in your chest, that itch that never goes away, is a problem to be solved. So we set goals, chase dreams, build identities. We think if we can just find the right career, the right person, the right city, maybe even the right version of ourselves, we'll finally feel whole. But Kierkegaard offers a brutal correction. You were never meant to be complete. He saw that the human condition itself is built on contradiction. We are animals that know we are going to die, but we act as if we can live forever. We are physical, temporal, limited creatures with infinite longing. The self isn't a fixed object, but a tension, a pull between who we are and who we could be. And that tension, that's the ache. That's the thing that feels like something is missing. Kierkegaard called it angst, not just fear or worry, but a spiritual dizziness, a sense of being suspended between possibility and reality, a kind of existential vertigo. You know you could become anything, but you haven't. You're still here, in this version of your life, and you can feel the weight of all the other versions pressing in from the shadows. But here's the lie. Most of us try to resolve this tension by escaping it. We tell ourselves we just need one more thing, one more relationship, one more level up, one more fix. We confuse freedom with comfort, and so we go shopping for identities, for distractions, for things that feel more like us. But every time the dopamine fades, the silence returns. Because the emptiness wasn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. The moment you believe you can solve the human condition, you lose the depth of being human. Kierkegaard believed that the self can't be found like an object. It must be created, through pain, through choice, through a lifelong dance with uncertainty. The moment you try to fill the hole, you deny the sacred nature of the hole itself. You forget that becoming isn't about replacing absence with presence. It's about learning to bear the absence. And here's where things get harder. Because the people around you, society, media, even loved ones, often reward the illusion of completion. They cheer when you seem sure of yourself, certain about your direction, stable in your choices. But deep down, you feel like you're acting. You feel like you're walking through someone else's dream. And the applause starts to sound like static. What Kierkegaard is really asking is this: can you be brave enough to stand in the middle of your life and not know what it's for? Can you stop running, stop fixing, stop filling, and feel the weight of your own being? This isn't a question of philosophy. It's a question of survival. Because the more we run from that ache, the more we become hollow. And the more hollow we become, the more we numb. Until we forget that we were ever alive at all. But what if that ache, that strange, persistent feeling of incompleteness, isn't a problem? What if it's a sign? We live in an age obsessed with clarity. Everyone wants to know who they are. Personality tests, identity labels, astrological signs, life purpose formulas. It's all a desperate attempt to end the ache of becoming. Because if you could just know, then maybe the anxiety would stop. But Kierkegaard warns, the moment you think you've found yourself, you've likely betrayed yourself. Because the self isn't a fixed image. It's a relationship, a dynamic tension between your finite existence and your infinite possibility. In other words, your soul isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a fire that's always burning. And the real danger? It's in thinking the fire is the problem. That ache you feel, that persistent dissatisfaction, that voice that says, this isn't it. It's not a sign you're broken, it's a sign you're alive. The real tragedy is not in feeling this tension, but in running from it. And society gives you every tool to run. Careerism, consumerism, self-branding, the curated identity becomes a wall between you and the terror of freedom. Kierkegaard calls this despair, not loud, dramatic sorrow, but the quiet hum of a life lived off track. A life where you perform a role so well, you forget it's not really you. You marry the safe option, you climb the ladder, you look successful. But at 2 a.m., when the house is silent, the mask slips. You stare at the ceiling and wonder, whose life is this? This is the despair of the self that is not itself. You've silenced the inner tension, and in doing so, silenced your own becoming. But here's the paradox Kierkegaard offers. You don't find the real self by searching harder. You find it by being willing to be lost, because to be human is to be thrown into existence without a map. You arrive in a body you didn't choose, in a world you didn't make, with a longing you don't understand. And in that chaos, you're expected to become someone authentic, stable, coherent. But what if authenticity isn't about consistency, but about honesty? What if it's about showing up each day and asking, who am I now in light of everything I've been? The self isn't something you sculpt, it's something you suffer. You are not just the sum of your preferences. You are a site of battle, between comfort and calling, between safety and freedom, between who you were and who you could still be. And Kierkegaard knew, the deeper you go into that battle, the more lonely it gets. Because most people don't want to become, they want to be told who to be. But your soul is stubborn. It will keep waking you up at night. It will keep breaking through your routines. It will keep aching, not because something's wrong with you, but because you were never meant to fit neatly into the world's idea of what a person should be. The ache is not a malfunction. It's the evidence that there's something more. You were never meant to be comfortable. You were meant to be true. And the path to truth, it runs straight through the heart of your despair. As a next step of our journey, we go deeper into the radical, terrifying freedom that Kierkegaard believed was both your curse and your salvation. We like to think of freedom as the ultimate gift, the thing we're always fighting for, the thing that makes life worth living. But for Kierkegaard, freedom was never simple. It wasn't a banner to wave. It was a burden to carry, a weight so heavy that most people spend their entire lives trying to put it down. Because freedom doesn't just mean you can do anything. It means you're responsible for everything, and that's terrifying. You're not just free to choose your job, your partner, your beliefs. You're free to define yourself moment by moment through every choice you make. There is no script, no guarantee, no excuse, no one to blame, only you facing the abyss. This is why Kierkegaard says, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. When you stand at the edge of your possibilities and realize, I could become anything, it's not just exhilarating, it's paralyzing. Because for every path you choose, there are infinite others you don't. And what if you choose wrong? What if you waste your life? So you hesitate, you stall, you distract yourself, you seek comfort in systems, beliefs, people, routines. Anything that will tell you who to be, so you don't have to carry the crushing weight of choosing. This is the birth of inauthenticity, not from malice, but from fear. You stop being a self and start being a role, a product, a reflection. You mimic, you adapt, you follow, you trade your freedom for identity, and wonder why it all feels so empty. But Kierkegaard doesn't condemn you for this. He understands it. Because the burden of becoming is so heavy it can break you. And yet, there's a kind of person who doesn't run from this fear. They turn toward it. They feel the dizziness of freedom and step closer to the edge. Not because they're fearless, but because they know the only way out is through. This kind of person begins to suffer their own soul. They let go of cheap identities, of surface roles, of the comfort of being understood. They choose the harder path, not because it's noble, but because it's real. They begin to ask, if no one was watching, if I stopped performing, if I abandoned every borrowed belief, who would I be? This is where life begins, because true selfhood, for Kierkegaard, is not about finding the right path. It's about standing naked before your own freedom and saying, I will become, not by accident, not by inheritance, but by choice. And yes, the cost is high. You'll feel alone. You'll feel terrified. You'll feel like something is being torn apart inside you. But that's not destruction. That's transformation. So, are you ready to transform? Then, let's go deeper. Kierkegaard didn't believe the self is something you automatically have. He believed it's something you become. And this becoming isn't smooth or linear. It's a process of wrestling with freedom, with despair, with contradiction. He writes, "The self is a relation that relates itself to itself," which sounds abstract, but here's what it really means. To become yourself is to become aware that you are split. There's the part of you that acts and the part that watches, the part that longs and the part that doubts, the part that plays the role and the part that knows it's just a mask. And most people try to silence that inner tension. They numb it with entertainment, with success, with noise, with goals. They live in one layer of the self and ignore the others. But Kierkegaard says the true self is born in the tension, when the layers begin to speak to one another, when the watcher begins to hold the actor accountable, when the doubter is invited to sit with the dreamer, when the whole self, fractured and painful, is finally allowed to exist in full view. This is the deepest meaning of despair, not sadness or depression, but the pain of becoming aware that you are not yet whole. And the deeper your soul, the more you will suffer this, because you feel the gap between who you are and who you were meant to be. You feel the weight of all the selves you've betrayed just to survive. You feel how far you've drifted from your truth. But here's the paradox. Despair is not failure. It's the beginning of awakening. Because the moment you stop blaming the world, stop chasing illusions, stop pretending the emptiness is just circumstantial, is the moment you realize the problem is spiritual. You weren't born to be comfortable. You were born to wrestle with yourself, to answer the silent question echoing through your bones. Am I willing to suffer the fire of becoming, to finally come home to myself? Not the self you show online, not the self you crafted to win love, not the self your culture rewards, but the self that was buried before the world touched you, the self that still flickers beneath the debris of your compromises, the self you stopped listening to when life got loud. This is the path Kierkegaard calls the leap of faith, but not faith in God as an escape, faith in your own capacity to become whole, even in a world built to fracture you. It is a brutal path, but it is the only one that ends in peace, because nothing the world can give will ever satisfy the soul you abandoned to get it. You weren't born with a manual, but with a wound. And every time you try to outrun it with answers, with logic, with labels, the ache only grows. Because maybe the truth isn't something you'll ever find. Maybe it's something you're meant to remember. And the forgetting was part of the journey all along. There is a loneliness that hides in crowds. It doesn't speak. It doesn't cry out. It just waits, like a fog on the edge of your thoughts. You carry it through conversations, through careers, through accomplishments. You laugh, you celebrate, you say all the right things. But underneath it all, something whispers, "This isn't it." Kierkegaard called this the sickness unto death, a despair so silent, most people don't even know it has a name. They just keep moving, distracting themselves, reinventing themselves, promising that the next phase, the next city, the next person will make it right. But it never does. Because the thing they're trying to fix was never broken. Kierkegaard said that anxiety is not something to be eliminated. It's a signpost, a trembling, sacred signal that you're brushing up against something greater than you, that you've caught a glimpse, not of your failure, but of your freedom. It is terrifying to be free. Because to be free means to decide, to be responsible for who you become, to look into the abyss of possibility and say, yes, I will choose. Not because someone told me to, not because it's safe, but because it's real. And that moment, when you choose, not from fear, not from what's expected, but from the depths of your soul, that's when the ache shifts. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes something else. A compass. See, we spend most of our lives trying to eliminate uncertainty. We build routines, we build beliefs, we build identities. But all of these are scaffolding, temporary, protective. What Kierkegaard is asking us to do is dismantle the scaffolding. and stand naked before ourselves, not to destroy who we are, but to finally see it. Because only when the false selves fall away can something more sacred emerge. The missing piece isn't out there. It's not a person. It's not a purpose. It's not a dream job or a healed past. It's your ability to sit in silence and hear yourself whisper back. You don't find meaning by eliminating despair. You find it inside despair. You walk into the void and listen. And in that listening, something begins to unfold. Not an answer, not a fix, but a kind of reunion with the part of you that always knew. This is why you feel like something's missing. Because the world gave you labels when you needed love. It gave you formulas when you needed silence. It gave you distractions when you needed the courage to stop running and feel. The ache was never the enemy. It was the invitation. The tragedy is not that we feel this longing. The tragedy is how far we go to silence it. We medicate it, spiritualize it, rationalize it, but Kierkegaard asks, what if it's holy? What if the ache is the voice of the self, begging you to stop looking outside and finally come home? There's no map for this, no checklist, no 10 steps. There's only one real question. Can you be still long enough to hear the voice beneath the noise? And when you do, will you have the courage to follow it? If you found value in this video, don't forget to show some love by clicking the like button. If you're ready to take action, write, "I am ready to become whole" in the comments. And if you want to continue growing and exploring the depths of your psyche, join our community by subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification bell to stay up to date. Until next time, keep shining, not to be seen, but to see.